Oh yeah, John Mansell, ex-boozehound. Hope you're well. When I've just done the test for the sound before I always do before I do a vlog, there's a tweeting bird which can be a little bit annoying, but I think I'm going to leave it in because it also can be relaxing. So that little tweeting bird's going to join me today in this vlog. I'm hoping I managed to keep this as short as possible, but I'm doubting it. And I am currently in a situation where anger and uncontrollable things I'm dealing with that. So but on Sunday there was something on the telly, and I noticed that our local MP James Morris was on there, so I listened with interest. I've known James for quite a while, and I like him. When I first met him, I tweeted that I was annoyed that I'd met an MP and he seemed human. That annoyed me, and some of the information, one of the stories they were going to talk about was around the issue that happened with Daly and Atkinson. I've got to refer to some notes over here, and mental health crisis, and there were three people on there, and I'm gonna quote all three. A lady called Deborah Coles from an organisation called Inquest, James Morris MP, Hal Zowen and Rowley Regis, Conservative, and Valerie Vaz MP, believe she's Labour, and it's Walsall. And obviously what happened with Daly and Atkinson was a horrendous situation, you know, and what's come out in the press since then about how long he was tasered for and the fact that the copper kicked him and all that sort of stuff, again, is horrendous. But it should never have got to that stage in the first place, and the reason it should never have got to that stage in the first place is that we should have a system in place that stops people getting out of control and getting to crisis. Now, I know that it is possible to avoid getting to crisis, and one of the reasons that I know it is possible to avoid getting to crisis is because I'm currently doing that now. I'm in a place at the moment that if I don't do the right things, I'm going to lose the plot. So I know it's doable, but we'll come back to that after. So initially, Deborah Coles from Inquest said Daly and Atkinson was having a mental health crisis what he needed was not a policing response, but a public health response. And it really concerns me that in 2021, we still don't have 24/7 emergency response units that can be called upon where there are people in crisis who need professional input, who don't need the kind of violent response that Daly received. And you know what, I couldn't agree with that more, you know, to a certain extent, but also I'm going to disagree with it, because we both have and haven't already got a 24/7 emergency response unit, and it's a combination of the police, West Midlands Ambulance, maybe West Midlands Fire. It's already there, and I know from meetings that I've had with very high ranking police officers, the first one being Chris Johnson, second one being Sean Russell, and then I've met other officers in the past that, you know, that they are incredibly keen or really passionate to do the right thing and respond in the right way to people with mental health issues. Yes, so I believe we do already have that 24/7 response, but I also believe we'll never have that 24/7 response. It'll never be in a situation where we can have the right amount of professionals to deal with mental health crisis available to go out to situations. And here's for me the problem is that at the end of the day, whatever that people say about the police is, they are responding to a call from the public. So the police are more frontline than anybody's ever going to be, and they have to get there and make a judgment very, very quickly about how they're going to deal with this incident. Now, I had a number of incidents in my drinking days, and I was dealt with robustly, and I'm not surprised I was, because I was a pain in the arse. I was, but again, there was nothing ever sort of discussed about my mental health issues. And the thing with the police is, I think these days as well, is if you look at the uniform that they have, it is very much more a confrontational look. It's more like a soldier's outfit, and in black, and it's almost like the SAS type kit, with the stab vests and stuff like that. But that's because of the climate that we live in. The police officers deserve to go out into what could be a very dangerous environment and have some safety. And the other thing that I remember when I had the first meeting with Chris Johnson, this was the first thing he wrote down. I talked about the language that the police officers use and have used for me in the past. You know what I'm talking about. We've had reports of an incident here and all that sort of stuff. Those sort of approaches and those sort of things are incendiary devices to somebody who's already losing the plot with a mental health issue. James Morris went on to say there's also that broader point that was made in your interview about responses to people who are having mental health crisis. I know from my work as the chair of the all-party group in the previous parliament that we did a lot of work looking at street triage schemes, which meant that in the event of somebody having a mental health crisis, they would be dealt with by cross-collaborative team of police and mental health professionals, rather than the police being the first responder. I think this case raises some complex issues, obviously, and a tragic situation, but hopefully lessons can be learned. Complex, absolutely. Lessons should be learned, absolutely. Will they? Probably not. I know a bit about the triage teams that James was talking about, because I was actually introduced, I think it was with James Morris and Norman Lamb MP and Sean Russell from the West Midlands Combined Authority, who was also a senior police officer. We went across and we spoke with Birmingham and Solihull mental health triage, and that day really blew me away, because when I first heard about mental health triage, it was a couple of years before, and I think what they were talking about was having mental health professionals on ambulances. And I said right at the start, that ain't going to work. It's not going to work. And I didn't want to be negative about it, but then when I wanted to see Birmingham and Solihull mental health triage, I thought, bloody hell, this does work. This is amazing. But the reason that I said it wasn't going to work in the first place is because there's never going to be a situation where you can have a mental health professional with every ambulance and every police car. And unless you can do that, the system won't work, because you can't know before you get to an incident what the situation is. And also, one of the other things is as well, is again talking about the language. I've since my mental breakdown, when I was trying to get my medication right, to begin with, I reckon I was probably in 5 or 6 different situations when my medication wasn't quite right, that if the police had been called, I would have been arrested. Probably for my own safety, but I also know that once you've broken, once you've cracked, once that straw has broke the camel's back, there's nothing that anybody can do to help. Any way that the police or ambulance or anybody approaches you could make things twice as bad. There was a story years and years ago of a local lad, a bit of a likely lad, and he used to go around asking people whether they liked his name. And basically you couldn't answer it right, because if you said yes, he said, I don't, and punched them. And if you said no, he said, well, I do, and punched them. So you've got this situation where you can't win. So if somebody with mental health issues has already lost the plot, any approach by mental health professionals as well could have an incendiary effect on it. Now, I would suggest that people with mental health qualifications or mental health experience, life experience like myself, have got a better chance of approaching these people, but still it's not, you know, a guaranteed win. And then Valerie Vaz MP went on to say, just to pick up a point about who picks up people with people who have mental health crisis. This is a situation where our social services needs to be looked at, and social services is one of the areas that the Secretary for Health will have to do some joined up thinking with the Home Secretary. Of course he will. There's a huge thing going on at the moment with regard to the Conservatives still not coming out and saying what they're going to do with the adult social care budget. The Secretary of Health will have to do some joined up thinking with the Home Secretary. Of course they will. They'll do the thinking. They'll make the announcements. They'll suggest what they're going to do. But whatever they come up with will not work, because it won't be resourced as well as it needs to be. And you know, it's one of the awards that I got a long time back, and I always remember this because I forgot all about it, and I was nominated partly because I'd taken part in a police training interview, and I've got a CD at home that I've never watched. And I can't even remember what I said, but what I would have said was that complete and open honesty is the fact that you know, when a police officer approaches you, you think, well, if you're at that point, you don't care. You don't care whether you're going to get arrested. You don't care whether you hurt yourself. You don't care whether you hurt them. You know, you don't care whether there's no rationality in your mind when you're in the middle of a mental health crisis. Now, for me, our 24/7 response team is already there, and it's a combination of mental health, adult social care, police, ambulance, fire brigade. And the reason I throw the fire brigade in there is, again, if some trained officers from the fire brigade approach somebody, I believe the chances of them exploding and reacting in a more explosive way will be lessened than if a police officer approaches them, because, you know, again, it's just that connection. You know, okay, let's you know, I've gone all out, let's just go for it. Let's, you know, so these it's there. As far as I know, from speaking with Chris Johnson and Sean Russell and lots of other police officers, there's an awful lot of police officers out there that want to do their very best for people with mental health issues. They want to protect and they want to serve. There are also police officers out there who couldn't care less about somebody's mental health issues, and that's not, you know, but there's always going to be that situation. There's a situation where the police will say, well, it's not our job to deal with people with mental health issues. They could be right. But the other thing is as well, even if you've got a police officer approaching somebody who cares about mental health, who really and knows there's a mental health situation going on, they know the person, they care about the person, they've dealt with them before. At the end of the day, if that person turns violent, you know, against another member of the public or themselves, or the police, or the person who's having the mental health crisis, they are going to have to step in and deal with it. Let's use the word robustly again. You know, and that has always got potential for making things go wrong, because, you know, the person with the mental health crisis could you know, flail about a bit and end up catching one of the officers in the nose and breaking his nose or her nose. You know, then you could all start going down the assault route. So it's never going to be perfect, but that's the point. It isn't going to be perfect. We can never get this perfect. And also, again, people, if we had a more inclusive system, going from primary care to secondary care to care in the community to everything, if we had the system that we should have, there's no need for people to get to crisis. Now, again, you're never going to stop everybody getting to crisis, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm currently managing my thoughts and my feelings, because I know that I have the potential of losing the plot at the moment. And I know this because I've worked really hard to understand my illness and how it works. And when I'm like this, when I'm getting tired for no reason, when I'm grumpy is a word I use a lot, when I can feel the anger boiling inside me, I know I've got to have a rethink. The other thing is as well, when we see it on the telly, whenever somebody's had a mental health crisis, they've stopped taking their medication. Now, you know, this could be true in all cases. I would guess it's not true in all cases. But at the end of the day, and this is a bit harsh, at the end of the day, the system out there is never going to be perfect. The system out there is never going to be able to help you with kid gloves at all times. So we, as the individuals with the mental health, addiction, whatever issues, have to work really hard to understand our illnesses and how we cope with moving towards crisis. As I'm saying it, I can hear people shouting, "You fucking idiot," and you know. But once you're into that crisis mode, there is no rationale left in you. Nothing makes sense. Nothing is controllable, and you couldn't care less about what happens. But there are always signs. Let's say that 90% of the time they're signs. Because, you know, I've seen people go from absolutely plastic to completely, utterly mental within, you know, 2 or 3 seconds. But there are signs along the way. Now, the thing is, I learned a long time ago, because once I dialed for a crisis team, I actually got a voicemail message that said I couldn't leave a message. Now, that was dealt with afterwards. There was a system after. But at that time, if I'd have been a little bit further into my mania, into my crisis, I would have absolutely lost the plot. So I know I can't trust the crisis system. So I decided that in order to keep myself away from crisis, I had to work really hard to understand my issues and how I deal with them. Now, I don't ask for help when I'm getting towards crisis. I have done occasionally. I don't ask for help because it's not there. You know, the support's not there. The wraparound care's not there. Now, wraparound care is an interesting phrase, because at the end of the day, although our illness makes us, you know, very difficult to control our emotions and stuff like that, it's not about controlling, it's about managing them. And we have to take some responsibility. If we stop taking our medication, then we're risking things. If we do certain things like take drugs or drink too much, we're risking things. And the system out there, whether it be emergency, whether it be appointments, whether it be anything, is never going to be perfect. It's never going to fix you. It's never going to be able to deal with you the way that you want 100% of the times. So we have to work on avoiding that crisis, and I believe that is possible in the majority of cases. But what it does take is, it takes us, the individuals, to know that and to work towards that. And it does take primary care, secondary care, emergency, AMPS, the police, the fire service, the ambulance, everybody. It takes them to work together. And I do believe they are trying to work together, but I've also seen situations where they can't work together because the red tape gets in the way. And it doesn't really matter about what that is. But mental health crisis, the system will never be in place to deal with every incident that happens. It just won't be. So we have to invest more heavily into the prevention and making people safer, and giving people places to go and people to speak to that they trust, because there's a hell of a lot of mistrust, because the amount of times that people have been let down in the past by adult social care, NHS, police, things like that. I don't like saying that, but again, what happens is the trust is broken and it never comes back. So we have to rebuild that trust, and we build that trust by working together. Now, it's gone past 20 minutes, so I haven't kept it short. I probably haven't said all I wanted to say. I've probably repeated myself in many places. But look, we don't want Daly and Atkinson should never have been in that situation. There should have been things in place before that, because I remember seeing it on the news, and I remember saying out loud, how long until they mention mental illness? And of course it was mentioned. We can stop these things happening, but we cannot stop these things happening the way that we're trying to do things at the moment. We have to go back to the drawing board and begin trying to treat mental health crisis weeks, hours, months before we get there, and we can do it if we do it in the right way. Enjoy the good, ride out the bad. Sorry I've gone on a bit, and I'll catch you soon. Bye bye.